Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are back with another webinar. So, today we have another special guest, expert in the field of Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Julius from Analytics Mania. Hello, Julio.
Hey, and thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you here. I've been waiting for this webinar quite a while myself, and I'm very excited to have you here. For people who are not sure who is Julius, I can give you a short introduction. I can introduce him. I've been thinking how I can do this. So I guess I will try this. So if you would go to YouTube and you would type in search bar Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics 4, I have no doubts that you would find Julius' videos first. So that's how good he is. He's an expert at what he does. And I'm very excited to have you here, Julius. So, Julius, could you tell me how you started this whole Google Analytics thing, Tag Manager, how your interest started in this whole niche, if it's not a secret, of course?
So it was actually quite an accident because in the beginning I was working in a digital marketing agency, and we were basically building websites for our customers, and occasionally we had to set up Google Analytics for them. And then, just out of curiosity, I started playing around with Google Analytics, which back then was the new version, which is currently the GA3. So I was playing around, trying to do this and that, and I had more questions and curiosity driven. And eventually what happened is that I had troubles when working with developers and Google Analytics, and then coincidentally Google released Google Tag Manager that was supposed to reduce the burden of developers, and you would depend less on them, and you could implement tracking codes by yourself, of course, with some nuances. So I tried to do that, and I really liked that, and eventually that became my main business. And now I'm working with clients. I have my blog post, I have my blog, my YouTube channel, and courses. And basically, I'm just breathing and living Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager every day.
That's a great story. I remember I had some struggle with setting up my Google Tag Manager, and I remember I watched your course, and and I'm very surprised, not surprised, probably excited. That now right here we have a webinar together. So thank you for joining. And before you begin with your presentation, I would like to address our audience. So guys, as you know, everything is as usual. At first we have short introduction, and then it's Julius' time. He's going to give us a presentation. He's going to share his knowledge about Google Analytics 4. And at the end of this webinar, we're going to have a Q&A session. So guys, do not hesitate to ask questions. This is your perfect chance to learn about Google Analytics, to answer any questions you have. And you can ask those questions during the webinar, and you can ask them, of course, once the webinar is over, once we have a Q&A session. So I guess this is it. The stage is yours, Julio.
Yeah, thanks. So let's dive straight into this, because the main topic is obviously Google Analytics 4. It's currently a very hot topic because, well, many people have to migrate to Google Analytics 4. And, in this short presentation, I want to basically give you some tips or maybe gotchas, like what you should know or what you should expect before you start considering and start working on the migration. So Gvidas gave a very good introduction about myself, so I just don't want to spend more time about that. Basically, I have a YouTube channel, and if you want to learn these topics, then consider subscribing. And now let's go to the main topic. But I think that the best way, at least how I start my presentations, is obviously with memes. So you probably, at least many of you probably already know what is the phrase, brace yourself, because something, well, not necessarily bad, but something terrifying is coming. And in this case, it's July 2023. I guess that some of you already know what that deadline is, but here's like the spoiler for those who don't. So what happens on July 1st of next year? Universal Analytics, which is also known as GA3, also known as the version of Google Analytics that you probably are using right now, and or maybe have been using for the last 10 years, it will stop collecting data. It means that you will still have your reports, but you won't see your new data in GA3. But that's not all, because Google tells that at least for 6 months, you will still be able to access those reports and access that old data in your reports. But maybe on January 1st, 2024, maybe a bit later, your GA3 data that you have been collecting for years, it will go away as well. You're basically going to lose all the data that you have. That is why you have to consider migration to Google Analytics 4 or maybe some other tool, but I would say that most of you will probably continue using Google Analytics services because it's still free, it has a lot of features, so definitely this is something to consider. If you're using a paid version of Google Analytics, which is GA360, which is a corporate version that costs a lot of money, then you will get several additional months for migration, but that's just about it. So now what? You have to switch to Google Analytics 4. And this won't be easy. Like, I have to tell you, like, honestly, this won't be easy. Both versions of GA4 of GA, which is GA3 and GA4, they are completely different, and there is no magical button that you just can click that says, "Hey, migrate to GA4," and then all of the data will be migrated, all of the settings will be migrated. This migration will require a lot of time, and it will require a lot of planning as well. So, first things first, and I mean, maybe some of you already have Google Analytics 4. You just you're just not aware of that. Maybe you don't know that you're using because maybe you're not that experienced yet. So let's check which version are you using of GA4, of GA, sorry. So if you go to your Google Analytics interface and you check the left sidebar and you see audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions, this means that you're still using the old version and you will have to migrate. If your interface looks like this, and on the sidebar you see things like explore or configure, this is a new version, and most likely you won't need to migrate, or at least you don't need to, or at least you will need to just implement some additional things, but the basis of the migration will not be needed for you. If you go to the admin of Google Analytics 4, or basically just Google Analytics, and you see data streams, this means that you're working with Google Analytics 4. So basically, if you see this, this means that you have to migrate, or at least you need to start thinking about the migration to Google Analytics 4. So today we're going to talk about several things. The first one is the advantages of GA4. I just want to show you, like, if you're not familiar with GA4 yet, just give you a brief overview of what are the possibilities and what is the potential of GA4. Then, again, GA4 is not perfect. There are some things missing, so I want just to to warn you that not everything is perfect, and some of the features that you love in GA3 will not be available in GA4. And then we have at the end some migration tips. There will be some brief tips, but again, they are here to set the right expectations. So advantages of GA4. First of all, it is promoted by Google as the platform that supports data coming both from your websites and from your mobile apps. Of course, most of the online businesses, they don't have mobile apps, but for those who have, this is definitely a huge advantage, because in the previous version of Google Analytics, it was quite a hassle to analyze the data of different platforms like website and Android or iOS. Then, at least in my opinion, custom reports, which are called explorations, in some cases, they're definitely more powerful, especially, for example, funnels. Funnels in GA4, funnels in GA3, I have to be honest in this case, I hate funnels in Universal Analytics, which is the old version, because you had to configure everything up front. And if you did some mistake, all your historic data in that funnel report is just useless. But in Google Analytics 4, just like in any other decent analytics tool, In Google Analytics 4, we can create ad hoc funnels, which means that you can collect data for a while, for months, for years if you want. And then when you're ready to do some analysis, you just configure the funnel, and that data, that historic data, will be displayed in the shape of funnel. So this is definitely something that I really like, and this was a long, this is a long-awaited feature that Google Analytics finally has received. Then another feature, which kind of has its counterpart in Universal Analytics, is path analysis. So in GA3, we had features like the report called flow report. It was behavior flow, and then it also was goal flow. So in this case, in Universal Analytics, it was quite limited because you always were able to analyze the journey of the user only from the beginning of the journey. So when someone lands on a page, then you can click on that page and then see various nodes, how those visitors are going to that website or maybe to that website. But what I like in path analysis of GA4 is that you can also start your analysis from the end of the journey. For example, in this case, my starting point is the end, which is purchase. And then I can click back and I can see what people were doing before they made a purchase. So this might give me some ideas and some insights what is happening before my main conversion. Then another thing is that Google Analytics 4 is capable of tracking more events by default, because Universal Analytics was able to do that just by tracking page views. You install Google Analytics code, basic one, and you just have page views. And you have, of course, metrics such as bounce rate, page views, users, and so on. But Google Analytics 4 is capable of tracking more. You add the same tracking code, but you will also be able to track when someone scrolls below the 90% of the page height, or when someone clicks an outbound link, which redirects the visitor to a third-party website, or when someone plays an embedded YouTube video on your website, or when someone clicks a link that downloads a PDF file, for example. So all of these can be tracked automatically, and this feature, which is called enhanced measurement, it is enabled by default. Then this is one of my most favorite features because I work a lot with implementations. So in Universal Analytics, you were basically able to see in real time events and page views. And if you want to send some additional data with them, like custom dimensions, or if you're tracking e-commerce data, you could not debug that in real time. Well, this is solved with Google Analytics 4 because there is a feature called debug view, where you can enable it, and then you start seeing all the incoming data from your device, and you see that as a stream. You can click on every event right here or right here. You can see what kind of parameters were tracked together with that event. So debugging becomes much faster. Of course, just as always, it is with Google Analytics 4, not everything is perfect. Sometimes there are bugs, but this is definitely a solid improvement compared to Google Analytics 3. Then we have a thing called conversion modeling. And actually, this is one of the places where the machine learning part comes in, because Google Analytics was promoted not only as a platform, GA4 was promoted not only as a platform that combines mobile and website data in the single property, but it will also do something with machine learning. And for a while, we were just waiting for those magical, mysterious features, and we had no idea what will happen. So right now, actually for a while, they had launched the conversion modeling feature. So what basically it means is that while you are collecting data, somewhere in the background, machine learning algorithms also check your data. And in reality, what you will notice, that like it was with Google Analytics 3 as well, is that some conversions are attributed to the direct channel. Direct channel means that a visitor landed on your website directly, but in most cases, it means that Google Analytics has no idea where that visitor come from. So basically, it's like a black box of information, and you just don't know where those people are coming from. But with machine learning algorithms, at least that's how it's supposed to work. So machine learning algorithms will try to analyze the data, and if the algorithm has a high confidence in particular analysis, then some of those direct conversions will be reattributed to a different traffic source. For example, if a visitor came to your site from one traffic source, but because of some technical reason or something else, that session was attributed to direct, with Google Analytics 4, that conversion will be reattributed back to organic search. But again, it's machine learning. We don't know how it works. Like, actually, nobody probably knows how it works because that's a black box. So this kind of feature and advantage is quite controversial because you don't know how this was calculated, and you don't even know which conversions were reattributed from, let's say, organic search or your paid advertising campaign. From direct to your paid advertising campaign. So there are some, there is some gray area right here, but the potential is quite powerful. Then another feature of machine learning is predictive analytics. So if you have a website with high volume data, and I mean like thousands of e-commerce sales, then Google Analytics machine learning capabilities and algorithms, they can try to create audiences that can predict who are most likely to buy within the next 7 days, or who is going to spend the most in the next upcoming 28 days or something like that. So when you have these audiences ready, then you can link Google Analytics 4 with Google Ads, import those audiences from GA4 to Google Ads, and then show targeted ads to them. So this is definitely something powerful, but this feature is more for larger businesses that have, thousands of e-commerce sales, every week. Then attribution. In the paid version of Google Analytics 3, there was a feature called data-driven attribution. But first, I want to quickly go one step backwards and to talk about what is attribution in general, but like very, very briefly. So when a visitor comes to your website, let's say from organic search, then from paid ad, the next session, and then the next session comes from email marketing campaign, and then when on that session the visitor converts, then usually Google Analytics will attribute that conversion to your email marketing campaign, and that is called last non-direct click attribution. So this was the default attribution model in Universal Analytics. It means that every time a visitor converts on your website, the reward or the credit for that conversion comes to the previous or to that current non-direct traffic source. And that was basically it. Like, there was no flexibility, but of course there were some additional reports. And in Google Analytics 3, the paid version, there was a feature called data-driven attribution, where machine learning decides which traffic sources should get the conversion, should get the credit for the conversion. But now in Google Analytics 4, this is available widely, and you can also benefit from this attribution model. So for example, if a visitor lands from organic search, then the next session comes from paid ad, and then from, let's say, email marketing campaign, then data-driven attribution might decide that, well, most credit should be given for the conversion to the last traffic source, which is email marketing, but also more credit should be given to the organic traffic source, because maybe that was the first traffic source that acquired the user. And again, there are some good parts, there are some bad parts in this case, because the bad part is, again, it's black box. We don't know exactly how it works. But from my experience, I would say that data-driven attribution is definitely something that gives you more context about particular traffic sources, and it actually helps you see more value in particular traffic sources, or actually maybe even demote particular traffic sources that are getting too much credit for conversions. So this is definitely something valuable, and again, it's now available for all free users of GA4. Then there are higher data collection limits. In Universal Analytics free version, you could collect up to 10 million hits, which basically means event, purchase, page view. So you could track up to 10 million events per month per property. If you exceed that limit, then Google's representatives, they contact you, and then they tell you to upgrade to a plan of $150,000 per year. So that's something like quite expensive. In Google Analytics 4, there is no limit, at least right now. I mean, I cannot guarantee that this will change or will not change in the future, but right now, GA4, in GA4, there is no limit for events. So you can have 10 million events, 15 million events, or something like that. So at least right now, this is unlimited. Then in Universal Analytics per property, you could create up to 20 custom dimensions and up to 20 custom metrics. In GA4, you can create up to 50 custom dimensions, 50 custom metrics, and also 25 user scoped custom dimensions. So the limits are a bit larger in this case. Then another feature, another benefit, which is probably not valuable for most of the users of GA4 because, well, they are quite, on the more basic or intermediate level. But those that are more serious about their data, that have the skills to work with things like SQL and BigQuery, they definitely appreciate this feature, which is BigQuery linking. BigQuery basically is like a data warehouse where you can stream automatically all events from your Google Analytics 4 property to BigQuery, and then by doing some advanced stuff, you can analyze the data there, because in BigQuery, you will have raw data where every row in the table is basically an event with some additional parameters, and that's where, more advanced stuff comes in. But, not everything is perfect, because the previously mentioned advantages, of course, they are not the only ones. There are more, but those are the most noteworthy, at least in my case. But not everything is perfect, let's be honest, in Google Analytics 4. It has some really powerful features, but also it doesn't have some features that we love in Universal Analytics. So there are some trade-offs that you have to be aware of. For example, in Universal Analytics, we had account. Then in account, we can have multiple properties. And then in the property, we can have multiple views. For example, property is a website, let's imagine like that. And then if the website, and I mean, for example, then you can create a view where you segment and see a subset of data about that website. For example, if you want to have a view where you see only data coming from mobile devices, and I mean like mobile website visitors, you can create a view for that. Or if you want to see the subset of data in a view, let's say of one particular category of the website or something like that, you could do that with views. Unfortunately, in Google Analytics 4, views are not available. If you're going to become a paid Google Analytics user, and I mean GA4 user, then there is a feature called sub properties. So then it is kind of like a replacement for views, but for free users. Right now, there are no solid, apples to apples alternative for views. There are some workarounds where you could probably, create segments in your reports, or maybe just use Data Studio or something like that. But there is no solid replacement for views in Google Analytics 4. Then, even though custom reports in Google Analytics 4, in my opinion, they're quite powerful, standard reports are quite limited. For example, I really liked in Universal Analytics to be able to click on something in the report, for example, on the homepage, and then drill down and see what kind of data or what kind of events or anything else, what is happening on the homepage. Unfortunately, in many reports, not all, but in many reports on GA4, you just cannot click on those rows. There are no links. This is just a text. So it makes the analysis a bit more, actually the navigation a bit more problematic. But I've seen some improvements in some reports, so maybe they will change that in the future. So let's hope so. Then there is a lack of standard reports because in Universal Analytics, we had a bunch of different reports, landing page report, conversion reports, and all the other stuff. For example, site search report was also quite useful, at least for me. For me, but in Universal Analytics, but in GA4, we have a quite limited number of reports. And for example, there is no landing page report by default in Google Analytics 4. There is no report for site search where you can see what kind of things your visitors are looking for on your website. You can create them, but they are not out of the box there. So it's quite annoying in this case, but maybe they will offer more reports in the future. However, what I've noticed is that Google Analytics developers, they are working more on customization of the reports. So maybe they will be, taking the approach where you build your own set of reports instead of just using what's predefined, which is powerful, but at the same time quite time exhausting. Like it will require a lot of time from you to configure those reports. So I would personally prefer if they had more predefined reports and also they offer more customization features. Then if we compare enhanced e-commerce reports in Universal Analytics against monetization reports in GA4, GA4 reports are more limited. Like they're lacking probably like 50% of all e-commerce reports that were available in GA3. So again, if you want to do some analysis related to e-commerce in GA4, you will most likely spend a lot of time in custom reports because standard reports don't show you as much as Universal Analytics did. Then some of the missing features. There are more missing features, but this is these are one of them. And in my opinion, these are definitely important ones. And I hope that at least some of them will be implemented in the future. So annotations, I like using annotations where you can just add quick notes to to the timeline, what happened on that day, what happened on that day. And then when you're looking at historic data, you can see that, why did we have that drop right here? And then you take a look at the note and you see, oh, that's because our site was down or something like that. So annotations not available, really hoping to see that in the future. Then there are no custom channel groupings. Filters in GA4 are very limited. You basically just can exclude your internal traffic with that, and that's pretty much it. So if you're doing something else, you will need to find some other ways around that. Then there is no built-in solution to exclude query parameters. This feature was useful if I wanted to clear some reports or some data in my reports in Universal Analytics. I have published some content about a workaround for that, but there is nothing built in GA4. There are no calculated metrics. As mentioned, there are no views. Surprisingly, there is no conversion rate as a metric, which is like, I have no idea. I cannot realize, like, I cannot fathom the fact that like this does not exist in Google Analytics 4. You can see the number of conversions. For example, you can see that you had 1,000 sessions and 100 conversions. You can see that, but there is no metric about, like, there is no conversion rate metric. So you don't see the percentage in your report. I really hope that they will introduce this in the future, but right now this is not available natively in Google Analytics 4 interface, which is quite a bummer, especially for those who are working with optimization, and they like the best indicator for them is not absolute numbers, but actually the ratios, the percentages. Then session scoped and item scoped or product scope dimensions, custom dimensions, they're not available, but that is definitely in the roadmap of Google Analytics 4. They have mentioned that some time ago, but we're still waiting and we don't know when that will be introduced. So now, as when we have a bit clearer picture about what to expect from Google Analytics, what are the benefits, but also what we are losing. Now, here are just very quick, but I still think that they're valuable tips because they will help you set the right mindset when it comes to migration. Because, like, I've seen many people trying to migrate, or actually who have migrated. So they had some struggles, they had some frustration. And one of the reasons for that is because they just did not have the right expectation. They were looking and they were expecting that GA4 completely replaces GA3, but that's not always the case. So my first tip is that you will have to do this. So you should start doing this as soon as possible. Of course, if you decide to continue using Google Analytics as a platform in general, but you just have to do this. Because here's the thing, you cannot transfer your historic Universal Analytics data to GA4. That is impossible. That will not happen. Two tools are too different. Their data structure is very different. So you eventually are going to lose that data that you have been collecting for years. So now you have to implement GA4 as soon as possible. And when GA3 stops working, you will already have at least some historic data, maybe, of the last 12 months or of the last 6 months, depends on when you migrate. But when July 1st comes, you should have as much data as you can in GA4, and that can be done only when you migrate to GA4 as soon as you can. because as I've mentioned, one of the reasons why data cannot be migrated from GA3 to GA4 is that data structure is very different. And here's just one of the examples. In Universal Analytics, we had event tracking, and we had to send 3 parameters. Well, actually 4, but right now let's focus on 3. So category, action, and label. And I mean, if you want, you can. If you don't want, you can just skip the label field, but you still had to send data to category with category and action. But in Google Analytics 4, things are more flexible. You just have to enter the event name, and then if you don't want, or if you want, you can send additional parameters, and you like set their names in any way you want, except of course eCommerce tracking or some recommended events. So in that case, you kind of should follow the naming convention of Google that is listed in their documentation. But when it comes to all other like events, you can come up with any parameters you want. For example, in this case, the event name is generate lead. So when someone submits a form, becomes a lead, then that event is tracked. And together with that event, I'm sending 2 parameters that I just came up with, which is form type and form ID. If I want, I can send even more parameters if that makes sense to my analysis. So it's more flexible. So in this case, it's kind of more powerful, but at the same time, it requires more responsibility. And I mean, like if you don't plan your events and your naming convention and your parameters up front, you will end up with a mess in your reports. Because in Universal Analytics, you basically had 3 parameters, and people were naming and like inserting like whatever values they wanted. But right now, they can come up even with parameter names, and like event names can be whatever they want, and the number of parameters can be whatever they want. So this requires more responsibility before the implementation of Google Analytics 4. So when it comes to planning, like what to migrate, like what kind of events should you migrate to Google Analytics 4 from GA3? And when I say migrate, I don't mean, again, transferring data from GA3 to GA4. Basically, migration in this case means that you have to re-implement everything or something that you choose and send that data to GA4, and you will just have a kind of like a new platform where you will see that data incoming, and that's it. Like the migration is basically just new implementation of a new tool, and that's it. So when you want to decide like what kind of things should you migrate, my number 1 tip would be don't migrate everything that you have in Google Analytics 3, because you probably have been using that tool for years. There's a lot of technical debt in that platform. There are many events that are no longer used. So first, I would list all the events that you have in Universal Analytics. I would basically list them in a spreadsheet like Google Sheets or Excel, and then I would just go and talk with people who have been using Google Analytics 3 in my company. Maybe my coworkers, maybe my clients, maybe something else. So I would then just ask them like, which events are you using? If they list or if they mark those events that they're using, I would also ask like, how are you using them? Like what kind of questions are you answering with them? So after doing this, you will realize that, like, and this is like real, you will realize that 20, 30, 40, maybe even 50% or even more of those events that you're tracking in Universal Analytics, it's no longer used. It's not needed. So why migrate that to GA4? Right now is a very good opportunity for you to have your spring cleaning and migrate only that stuff which actually matters to people who are using that data. You need to migrate only what matters to your company. So in that case, when you have that sheet prepared with filled in with the events that are actually needed, then you can start that migration. And as I've said, you just need to create new set of tracking codes, or if you're using Google Tag Manager, new set of tags that will send the data about that interaction to Google Analytics 4. If you're using Google Tag Manager, migration will be like fairly, like not fairly, but like it will be easier than having to deal with the hard-coded tracking codes, because in Google Tag Manager, if you have Universal Analytics tracking codes, you already have a thing called triggers, basically conditions when those tracking codes should be activated. So you will be able to reuse that very same trigger. You will just need to create a new tag that will send event data to Google Analytics 4. So with the same trigger, you will be sending data to old version and to the new version at the same time. And that's where I actually come to the next tip. So when you are doing, when you're working with the migration of Google Analytics 4, then my recommendation would be to run both versions at the same time. So you keep your old version of Google Analytics, but you also have the new version being implemented in parallel. So in parallel means basically that you have two kind of setups at the same time. And then when you have been doing that for a while, when you have been collecting data for a while, then you will need to kind of like compare the data of both versions and see like, are they kind of matching? But here's the thing. A lot of metrics in Google Analytics 4 are calculated differently as like compared to Google Analytics 3. For example, sessions are calculated differently. Users might be calculated differently, but again, numbers will not match. Then conversions will not match because in Google Analytics 4, the numbers will be higher because every conversion completion in Google Analytics 4 is counted as a conversion. While in Universal Analytics, if the same person completes the same conversion in the same session 3 times, Universal Analytics will count it only as one goal completion, while Google Analytics 4 will calculate this as 3 completions. So the numbers in GA4 are expected to be higher. And then when you're ready, so it means that when you think that data is close enough, although you have to be prepared and discrepancies of 10, sometimes even 15, maybe 20% are possible in your numbers when you compare two platforms. So eventually when you're kind of, like convenient enough with the migration, then eventually you could remove GA3. Although personally, I would probably recommend that when you have GA3 and GA4 at the same time running on the website, you remove GA3 when it stops working officially, when it's, when the July 1st of 2023 comes. But before that, you should still keep having that, because in some situations you will find yourself that you cannot answer particular questions with GA4 because maybe some reporting features are lacking, and then you will find yourself sometime that you come back to GA3 to answer particular questions. Because right now, personally, here's how I work. I have some question, I want to answer that with data, and first I go to GA4, but sometimes I just cannot do that. I go to GA3. Some features in GA4 are more powerful, so I am able to answer those questions with the new version, but sometimes I still have to go back to the old version because that is still, it's a mature platform, and those features are still quite useful. Another thing you should keep in mind is that when you have installed Google Analytics 4 on a website and you still have GA3, you will be tempted to check the data in real time. And Google Analytics 4 has real-time reports. Google Analytics 3 has real-time reports. So here's the thing. Google Analytics 4 real-time reports shows the data of the last 30 minutes. GA3 shows the data of the last 5 minutes. Numbers will never match. So keep that in mind, because I've seen way too many situations where people are confused that something is wrong and GA4 is tracking way too much. So not really, it's just different time frame. And yeah, so these were like the main tips for the migration. The key takeaways here are that GA4 is completely different from GA3. There's a very steep learning curve. So you should start learning it as soon as you can, and the learning process depends on you. Like there are video tutorials, including my YouTube channel. There are some blog posts, documentations, including my blog. There are courses if you want to get up and running much faster. Again, there's a course on Analytics Mania. So you should start learning as soon as possible, because let me tell you this, you will need to unlearn some things from Universal Analytics and learn or relearn some new things for Google Analytics 4. So it's definitely a steep learning curve, and you should prepare yourself, and it's a tough journey waiting for you ahead. Then just a reminder, you cannot migrate old GA3 data and import it to GA4. That's not possible, at least right now, but I don't see this happening anytime soon or happening at all. So I would not hope for that. And instead, I would start migration or actually implementation of GA4 as soon as I can. So migrate right now, or actually start learning right now, and then migrate as soon as you can. Then when you implement GA4, keep them running for some time side by side. Actually, I would say I would recommend running both tools in parallel before, up until the actual deadline, which is July 1st, 2023, and then compare metrics. But their values, at least some of the values, will not match that much. For example, but event counts will match, or at least will be quite close. So if there is a discrepancy, like up to 5% in event count, I would say that this is a good migration. But if you have 20% discrepancy in event count, where you have form submission in the old version, form submission in the new version, I mean the events, and GA4 has less or more like events by 20%, something is definitely wrong. Maybe the implementation is wrong, or maybe you have decided to not migrate something to GA4, and maybe that is causing some discrepancy, or maybe some other reasons. So there are many possible reasons for that, but just keep in mind that metrics will not match, and you should never strive to reach that 100% accuracy, because, like, let's be real, you will probably not be able to do that. And yeah, I already said that I would recommend removing GA3 if you have that on your site only in mid 2023. And I'm sure that this is kind of a bit confusing. So if you are, if you don't know where to start, and if you just are trying to take the first steps with Google Analytics 4, then I got you covered. So I have a free ebook. You just can go to analyticsmania.com/learn-GA4. And in this, you will learn like the very first steps, like installation, event tracking, like how to configure conversions, and then how to build your first reports. And when you do that, then like it will give you like a first good like steps in your learning journey. But there's a very long road ahead. But if you're just taking your first steps, this is definitely something where you can start. So yeah, that's it. And thank you for staying in this webinar.
Thank you, Julius. That was a really great presentation. I really love that tip that you could use, the old version and the new version at the same time. So I don't know, it's kind of painful, that the old version is shutting down, and myself, I'm gonna need to move to a new one. I don't know, just like, it's kind of sad, Julius.
It is sad, and many people are like, there's a huge outrage in the industry, but that's the reality. Like, if looking from my perspective, I would say Google is doing that too soon. They pushed Google Analytics 4 down our throats a bit too soon. I would say, at least additional 12 months would be nice, but it is what it is.
Yeah, they kind of do not leave us with other choice, but you just gotta adapt, I guess. All right,
Yeah.
So Julius, I guess right now we can move on to the Q&A session. We kind of have quite a few questions, and I would like to address our audience. If you still have any questions, this is your time to ask them. All right, so let's start with our first question, and it sounds like this: is the new version of analytics really better? Julius, what's your opinion?
It depends. Like, it's one step forward and one step back. Like, basically you're in the same place, but you got something new, you lost something. And I have mixed feelings about Google Analytics 4 even till this day. Like, there are some things that I love, there are some things that I hate, but eventually I'm kind of getting used to that situation where I just accept the fact that they are different tools and some things are missing. So again, some things are better, some things are worse, and it's kind of status quo. Although I would say that some very important features are missing. For example, in my opinion, custom channel groupings or views are definitely something that I would like to have, and of course conversion rate. So it's some basically mixed feelings. Yeah.
All right, thank you for the answer. Here's another question. Hi, Julius. So what do What to do with historical GA3 data if we want to remain accessible?
Yeah, so right now, kind of the entire industry playing around and looking for options. One way, which is quite limited, is that there is a plugin for Google Sheets where you can export particular report. Like, for example, you select the time frame, you export the data, and then people use that Google Sheet as a data source for Data Studio report or something like that. I'm not a fan of this, but for some people who just want to see, let's say, top traffic sources from the last 2 years, that will work. Then another thing, I haven't tried it myself, but I heard that some people are considering to do. There's an analytics platform called Matomo Analytics, and they have integration with Google Analytics 3, where you can basically import data from Google Analytics. So some people are doing this. I haven't tried this myself. I will still need to explore this option, but basically they say that you can import data from Universal Analytics to Matomo and probably pay some monthly fee for Matomo interface, which is fairly close to Universal Analytics, and then you can see that data there. But like, does it really work? I cannot answer that. Like, these are like two main options right now. I also heard there are some other tools that also offer some sort of export data where you then store it somewhere else, but that something else is not Google Analytics 4. So we are still investigating this.
Thank you for your answer, Julius. All right, let's move on to another one. All right, so is there any way to prevent AdBlock from blocking Google Analytics? Maybe with the new version you can avoid it. Like Firefox, Opera, and some other browsers block it by default. What's your opinion on
No,
this?
I mean, is there any way? Yes, it's called server-side tagging. Does Google Analytics 4 avoid, can ad blockers be avoided by new Google Analytics 4 version out of the box? No, it's still using the same request URLs. So the ad blockers and Brave browser and all the other stuff, they are still blocking that pretty successfully.
Thank you, Julius. All right, let's move on to another one. And this one sounds like this. So, can we see all the sites referral? If I make advertising on different websites, can I see exactly from which one the visit is coming from?
Yes and no, depending on the settings of the website and so on. So, in Universal Analytics, we could see the acquisition reports. We were able to see referral data. The same data can be seen in Google Analytics 4 as well. So, if on that website, on that some other website, there is a link to your website and a visitor clicks, then you will see from which domain did that visitor land on your website. However, there are some nuances. For example, you won't be able to see the full URL because of some current privacy standards, where a thing called referral is affected because of another thing which is called referral policy. So this is one thing. Also, that website on which your link is, that website can decide to not pass the referral data. Maybe they will add some particular parameter to the URL that drops the referral information. Or maybe they have a site-wide policy that prevents the referral data from being transferred to your website and your analytics tool. So it is possible, but it won't happen 100% accurately on all times.
Thanks for the answer. Okay, let's move on to another one. And it sounds like this. Does Google Analytics provides better SEO on Google search engine? Are there any
Then
advantages?
better than what? Then question is, so better than the older version. I've seen that SEOs are quite angry with the new version because the entire analysis process is different, because the interface and the workflow is completely different. Many things are still possible to achieve, but the configuration and the navigation of the reports is completely different. If you give an experienced SEO access to Google Analytics 4 and you tell him or her to find this and that, even though that is possible in Google Analytics 4 to find out, they will probably struggle for quite some time until they understand how the interface works and what is the process, because like GA4 is not very intuitive for those who have been familiar with Universal Analytics. There are many different things. That is why, as I've said, you will have to unlearn a lot of stuff to learn new stuff about GA4.
Thanks, Julius. All right, so the next one is this one. Can switching to GA4 affect Google Ads? Or probably in a positive way.
Or maybe negative way. So, like the question is very broad. Sorry, but like one thing just to mention is that if you have like the first thing that comes to my mind is that if you have Google Ads account and you have Universal Analytics and that is already linked, and you import conversions to Google Ads from Universal Analytics, and then at the same time you connect Google Analytics 4 with Google Ads, and you also import conversions, you will have duplicate conversions because the same conversion will be reported twice in Google Analytics, in Google Ads. One conversion from GA3, one from GA4. So you need to keep that in mind. And when you connect GA4 to Google Ads, then in GA3, then you will have to mark GA3 conversions in Google Ads as, I forgot the parameter, secondary, something like that. Basically, yeah, I don't remember that parameter, but you have to make sure that from that moment when you connect GA4 to Google Ads, your GA4 conversions are now treated as primary conversions, while GA3 conversions are not included in that main number of conversions. Otherwise, like your data will be like duplicated.
All right, thank you, Julius. All right, let's move on to the next one, and this one sounds like this. What about enhanced e-commerce report alternative? Will explorations cover it enough?
Not everything. I remember the fact that some of the reports right now cannot be like fully recreated in like some of them e-commerce reports cannot be fully recreated in explorations, but I don't remember which ones exactly. But there was something that I tried, and at that moment I did not succeed, but because some dimensions are missing in the interface. But that is expected to change, I think, in some time on, sometime in the future. But I cannot tell you that. But Google Analytics 4 can, you can use Google Analytics 4 to recreate e-commerce reports close enough, but not identically, because I don't remember, but something there is missing, and I just forgot that.
Thanks, Julius. All right, so probably you have already answered this question, but this one's going to be for everyone who might have missed this part. All right, so is it possible to use both the old version and the new version of GA4 before switching fully to GA4?
Yeah, the answer is yes, and this is the recommended way. If you have the old version, keep it, run the new version in parallel, then, and first of all, the reason number one is that you will use both versions to compare their metrics, and the other reason is that if some features are missing in Google Analytics 4 before that July 2023 comes, then you can go back to your Universal Analytics reports and use them as an alternative.
All right, thank you. All right, the next question is very simple. Will we lose all the previous stats, data,
yes,
everything? Sadly, yes. Too bad. All right, let's move on to another one. And this one sounds like this. Hey, Julius, do you think GA3 is outdated and GA4 was really necessary?
I think that there are many reasons for that, and some of them are known, some of them are unknown. So the first thing that why GA4 was necessary is the changing landscape related to ad blocking, data blocking, privacy regulations. So the old version of Google Analytics is outdated in that part, because Google Analytics 4 let me tell you this. So right now, data quality, and in the future, it will continue drastically drop. Like we will be able to collect less and less data because people will be blocking, more privacy regulations, something like that, and there will be more and more gaps in your data. So the main one of the main philosophies in Google Analytics 4 is the machine learning, where basically machine learning will check what you have already collected, and then based on that data and based on thing called behavior modeling, they will try to fill in certain gaps of data that is missing, and that might be done with things like consent mode, for example, but that's like too technical for this webinar. But basically it will try to fill in certain gaps and make your data at least a bit better, even though you have some serious gaps in your data. That was not possible with you. That would not have been possible with the old version because everything is like, very old there. The data model is like probably 10-15 years old. So definitely something that it was easier to probably create a completely new platform rather than trying to fix something that, if they tried to fix universal analytics, probably they would have broken that completely. So this was probably, in my opinion, one of the main reasons. Also, maybe some other reasons, but this is more like a speculation. Maybe, Google has been collecting data for years about, from Universal Analytics. Maybe, they just want to kind of clean up all that stuff by offering a new version. And this is not beneficial for us because we lose historic data, but maybe one of their like political decisions was to, let's start clean. Let's remove all that garbage. Well, garbage. It was data for us from the last 15 years or last 5 years, and then let's allow people to use more advanced stuff, more machine learning, like in exchange. But definitely, I know there is no like simple answer in this case because some features are definitely missed right now in GA4, and I wish that they would implement them, but I'm not sure when that is going to happen. But I would say that one of the main reasons is definitely privacy landscape, because that is going to change, and that is changing already, like for the last 4 years since GDPR and ITP app from Apple and all the other stuff. So Google is trying kinda to mitigate that, but it's difficult.
All right, thank you. All right, so here's another question from Mugna. Also, what sources should we use for more in-depth learning about it?
That's a great opportunity to do some plug of my blog. Yeah, but basically, normally, just like if you want to get started, just use Google search, and like there's a very high chance that somewhere at the top you will find Analytics Mania as well. So I have blog, I have like where most of the content is GTM and GA4, YouTube channel, weekly videos, and then also if you want to get some shortcuts and like get up and running much faster than my online courses about Google Tag Manager, but also there's a course about Google Analytics 4. But yeah, like if you like normally I would say you can start with Googling. Like if I try to be honest, you can try with Googling and then see what kind of traffic, what kind of teaching resources can you use. There's a documentation. There is one expert named Simo Ahava. He's like doing a lot of stuff, especially with server-side Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. Measure School and like several others. So in this case, like Google and try to use different learning resources, and then just see what works for you the best, because everyone's learning style is different, and I just cannot push some one option for you.
All right, thank you, Julius. All right, so we have quite a few questions left. So the next one sounds like this. You mentioned all the machine learning stuff. What data is needed for GA4 to benefit from it? Should we track anything additional like CRM data or something similar?
Like there are different features, and like there are different machine learning features in GA4, and the requirements for that are different. So you should always refer to the documentation of Google Analytics 4, because Predictive audiences require thousands of orders per week. Data-driven attribution requires much lower limits. Then there was something else which also had some quite low requirements, and different features require different levels of data and what kind of data is needed. So there is no single straightforward answer.
Thank you, Julius. All right, let's move on to another one. All right, so this one sounds like this. As for heatmaps, what do you think about Microsoft Clarity? Does the new version of GA4 include heatmaps?
I have just played once with Clarity, so it looked like a regular heatmap software, but it's free, so that's good. GA4 does not have heatmaps.
Too bad. All right, thank you, Julius. All right, let's see another one. Just a second. All right, so here's the question. When I want to change owner of the website, how will I be able to change and I won't see the data of the website on my analytics?
This doesn't sound like GA4 question, probably like the owner of website in general. So if you change the owner of the website, but the same tracking codes are being used, analytics should not be affected. But the question is very broad, so it's difficult to answer that with full details, but it should not affect.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to another one. All right, here's the question from Mugne. Is there some kind of plugin to migrate GA3 to GA4? What's the easiest way to do so?
I have seen some tools that try to do that, but personally, I would take the long road because I would not try to take some shortcuts with migration, because this is your chance to start fresh, start clean, start from the white sheet of paper with your setup. So instead of just blindly migrating, because if you migrate the events like quickly with some tool, all of those used and unused events will be sent forward to Google Analytics 4 as well. I mean, they will be tracked with Google Analytics 4 as well. So you're kind of just transferring your technical debt, all those mistakes and all that unused configuration from the last 10 years or 5 years or whatever to your new tool. And you're basically just having the same pile of potential garbage. I don't know. So I would recommend to actually take the entire process carefully, have some checklist. For example, in my GA4 course, there's a 100 list item checklist of migration, check this, check that, do this, do that. And then you just evaluate, we have, let's say, 20 custom dimensions in Google Analytics 3. Do we need them all? I could ask around in the company, and there's a very high chance that probably 5, maybe 10 custom dimensions are no longer needed. So there is no point to re-implement that. So instead of, trying to find some shortcuts, I would instead focus and invest my time in actually rethinking that entire strategy of tracking and the setup, because that is supposed to give you some wins and some benefits in the long run, because then you will have cleaner reports, cleaner data, and potentially cleaner data. But this is definitely something that I would carefully spend more time on, that especially on thinking and planning, rather than just try to find some tools. There are some tools, but they will not, there is no tool that will migrate everything, every setup, every point of the setup in 100% accuracy. So you will still need to do some work, but again, I would personally do the entire thing in the long way, because that would help me think more about the setup and about the value that it could potentially provide for the business.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question sounds like this. Is setting up Google Analytics 4 for an e-commerce website the same as setting up for a blog?
No. If you just care about page views and clicks, then yes. If you care about e-commerce and sales tracking, then no, because blog doesn't have probably sales, or maybe has something, but e-commerce website has carts, product pages, product lists, and all the other stuff. So the setups should be very different. And in general, like when you're dealing with the website, you need to think like what purpose does that website like serve for the business, and then based on those answers, like based on those goals of the website, then you decide what should be tracked. I never do things like, let's track on this website the same thing that we tracked on that website, because websites are different. They serve different purposes. So track what is important, not everything you can.
Okay, thank you, Julius. All right, just a second. Let me go through the questions. Just a second. All right, so here's another question, and it sounds like this. As you mentioned, Julius, that GA4 is more for creating custom report. Can you suggest some reports which we must have to create, should create, something like this?
Well, the first two that come to my mind that I always have to create is landing page report and site search report, because those are not available by default. I mean, you can build them in standard reports as well by customizing them, but they're not available out of the box. So these are first two that I can think of.
Thank you, Julius. All right, the next question is here, and it sounds like this. It looks like the default reports of GA4 are built to be user-friendly for beginners. But if you want advanced reports, you will still be able to create them through Explorer or connecting GA4 to Data Studio?
Yeah, is the second option. So yeah, you will need to spend a lot of time in explorations or in Data Studio, or go even more advanced and BigQuery, and maybe BigQuery could be connected with Data Studio. But basically, for very basic needs, standard reports are kind of enough. Although, as I've mentioned, some reports are missing in my opinion. But if you want to do more advanced stuff, like, you will spend most of your time outside of standard reports.
All right, thank you, Julius. It seems like we don't have any more questions. We still have some time. If you have any questions, please ask them now while Julius is still with us. And yeah, I guess we could thank you, Julius, for amazing presentation, for answering all our questions. It was really nice to have you here. Now I'm just gonna need to go back home and try migrating my old version to a new one. So thank you very much for your presentation, Julius.
You will have a very, very, very long night in that case.
That's sad, That's sad that the old version is shutting down. I wish it wasn't like that.
Yeah, we wish the same thing. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. I hope that you and those who watch this webinar have found at least some of my stuff useful.
All right. Thank you, Julius. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for joining us, and see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.